Breaking news, this is your World War III update. So Russia and Belarus are accusing Poland and NATO of getting ready to stage a false flag attack against Polish civilians that they will then blame on the Belarusians, who have nuclear weapons, I should add, which of course would bring East and West to the brink of thermonuclear Armageddon. But before that, it would provide Poland license perhaps to enter Western Ukraine and fix the Belarusians and Russians in place by positioning even more troops along the border there. Now, we also have claims of CBRN gear moving into Ukraine in the hundreds of thousands. We're talking about hazmat suits, gas masks, other types of personal protective equipment, and antidotes to various chemical weaponry. We also have to talk about what's going on in the Middle East because I haven't made a video in 72 hours. I'm very tired. I've needed a break. So we released a lot of blue strip content, blue pill content that everybody completely ignores, which is fine. I get it. We're getting down to crunch time. Information is what people value most. But the Houthis have been lighting it up. They captured a very expensive and technologically advanced submersible drone. Unless this was just being used as bait by the Americans, that'd be a 4D chess move that I don't think we're capable of at this point in time. I just don't think we have the foresight, the stratagem employed in our military, who's been dependent on technology all of these years. They shot down a $30 million US drone. They sunk a ship. They've attacked multiple ships, and the attacks are just ramping up and up. So clearly, all of these attacks that we're doing in Yemen are having no effect whatsoever, and the situation is only going to get worse. Now that they've sunk a ship, if you thought that ships were not going to travel through the Red Sea before, I mean, now forget about it, okay? Nobody is going through the Red Sea at this point. It's just simply not worth the squeeze, which means the Suez Canal is going to go into the pisser, which is going to create more problems for Egypt, which is going to make them more likely to enter into a conflict because of all of their economic problems, likely on the side of the Israelis. However, there might be pushback from their population. There might be civil unrest there. Regardless, the whole situation is about to go up in flames. I mean, Lebanon has been getting lit up by the Israelis over the past 48 hours. That one is pretty much guaranteed. We are absolutely going to see a war with Lebanon and Israel. It's just a matter of when it is going to happen. Remember, the only way Netanyahu remains in power is if we're in a perpetual state of war. Now, we also have that fiasco with the Trident missile, the nuclear missile that did not go off. It wasn't armed, of course, with one, but this was a nuclear test that was or a test of a nuclear delivery system, I should say, by the UK that failed, and failed quite embarrassingly. And this is likely why the Americans are positioning F-35s armed with new nuclear weapons inside UK, because they are completely impotent in their ability to defend themselves by nuclear means from the Russians, in spite of all the tough talk. Now, before we get into this whole false flag accusations, because that's what they are, but I try to give you guys a neutral point of view, and you can decide. I trust that you have the mental faculty to discern what is true and what is false, unlike some other legacy media networks. But before we dive into that, I gotta say that I totally understand that right now it's getting tough for a lot of people. It's bad, and unfortunately, it's only going to get worse from here on in. There's no way of sugarcoating it. The best case scenario at this point of time is things stagnate. And unfortunately, stagnation in an economy that relies on infinite growth to keep itself afloat and to keep the house of cards standing inevitably entails a decline, a deterioration. So if you have a stagnating economy on one that requires you to make more and more money to service a larger and larger debt load, then it's inevitably going to crash. It's going to contract. And we are definitely in a period of economic contraction. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. The stock market's finally starting to sort of catch up with that fact, that reality. It's going to crash too. But remember, the stock market is also inflated by currencies which are inflated themselves. So it's not necessarily a measure of how bad things really are, maybe in nominal terms, but not in real terms. So the average person is struggling, but the unfortunate thing is that this current level of suck is as good as it's going to get for the foreseeable future. It's only going to get worse. We're entering a period of economic contraction. What's guaranteed is contraction. From this point forward, what's guaranteed is a degradation in the standard of living, only slightly offset by some technological advances here and there with virtual reality and AI to keep people busy a little bit longer. But your standard of living is going to deteriorate. Your purchasing power is going to continue to deteriorate. Now, that's all baked in. That's all guaranteed, locked in. What is the wild card here is that as we decline and as we enter the twilight of Western civilization and we pass the apogee of this experiment, we are going to have a higher risk of getting into a war with another nation state. And of course, that's going to entail the prospect of using nuclear weapons. So the worse conditions get, the game theory becomes game reality. Okay, so when resources become more and more scarce, you are going to have a greater risk of war over those resources. And we're entering a period of conflict. And I probably shouldn't make a dedicated video about this because I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. But basically now they're going to try to give immigrants citizenship and entice them by saying, hey, if you join up for the military for X amount of years, we'll give you a fast track to citizenship. So that's how they're going to do it. I've said they're going to be doing this for a couple years now, or a couple months, I should say, more vocally. And then in the last couple weeks, I've been ramping up this prediction. And lo and behold, you have a bipartisan bill being proposed that seeks to do that very thing. But in spite of this, what I want to say is this. I want to share something with you that I call the prepping inversion principle. And it's this idea that what you value now, what we value while the grid is up, what is ascribed value, because most things in our society, when you go and you look at a thing in a store, it has a dollar value attached to it. Well, that value is by and large derived by the context, the society that surrounds it, what utility it has in that period of time while the grid is up. Okay, so a TV has a certain value while the grid is up and society is functioning. A TV, when we're in Mad Max, has almost zero value. It's almost the complete inversion, okay? That piece of land that's way the hell out there in the boonies that you can get for pennies on the dollar right now is going to be the absolute most valuable thing when the shit hits the fan. Conversely, the big mansion in the city, in the nice part of downtown, along the riverfront, okay, or in one of the high-rise buildings, the penthouse, the absolute worst place to be. $20 million suites are going to be absolutely worthless. Now, maybe this is what they mean in the Bible when they say the last will be first and the first shall be last, or that the meek will inherit the earth. And you guys know I'm an agnostic, but an agnostic means I don't know. And I do say that, you know, maybe God just made me almost choke on my my words there. That was weird. I know some of you guys are going to love that I just said that. Anyways, you know, there's something about that, right? Because right now our priorities are kind of messed up, but it makes sense in the context of the grid being up that you would value certain things that you wouldn't value if you were just on a quest for survival. So what I'm trying to say is, right now 99% of the population is still preoccupied chasing the ever more diluted American dream that is fading away. And soon enough, these 99% are going to shift their attention into panic buying whatever remains when it occurs to them what's happening. You still have an opportunity to get that stuff that is pennies on the dollar right now that we don't see as having value. Now, I know somebody's going to take this prepping inversion principle. There's this one guy that's been robbing all of my stuff. He's going on TikTok and he doesn't give any credit to what's being said. So here is one for you, you unimaginative son of a bitch. It's called the prepping inversion principle, okay? What we value right now is not going to be what we value when this whole shithouse goes up in flames, as Jim Morrison, I just quoted Jim Morrison. See, at least I give him credit. Anyways, remember that. You still have time, you still have a chance, but you need to maximize yourself on all personal dimensions right now while the getting is good, because things are only going to get worse, okay? They're going to give you maybe slightly better internet connectivity, and mine has been absolute shit lately. I don't know about yours. They're going to give you, maybe a discount on a used car. You're going to see certain things start to drop in price and disinflate, but that's about it. Okay, we're going down into the pisser, and we're going down fast. So lock it in while you can. Okay, how is World War III going to start? It becomes clearer and clearer. It's definitely going to happen on the border between Western Ukraine and Poland. Now, there's another factor here with these protests, this blockade of Ukraine that is going on. And this is where you could potentially see some kind of civil war on that front. I haven't figured out how exactly that factors in, but you have farmers calling for Putin's help. Okay, so that's how bad this has gotten. Anyways, what's going to happen, according to Belarus and the Russians, and I should say that around a month ago, I told you, when I showed you a video, if you've been one of the more avid viewers, you probably recall that I showed you a video of Lukashenko, and he was very, very distressed when he was giving this speech. Noticeably, his body language communicated to me that this is a man who knows that bad times are coming. Okay, now he could just, maybe he was concerned about political unrest because there is an election happening in Belarus that is not being publicized at all for obvious reasons, because they're trying to keep it under wraps. We all know what happened in 2020, or some of us do anyways, where they had the civil unrest in Belarus during the pandemic. The guys with putting the women in the vans and all that stuff. But he knew that that's going to be the next front. I think he knows that this is going to be where NATO makes their move, and this is where Belarus who has now been empowered with nuclear weapons, they're going to be tasked with a responsibility. I don't know what that's going to be. We know that the border between Belarus and Ukraine is heavily mined. It's heavily fortified on both sides, as is the case with the border between Belarus and Poland and Lithuania. So if there's going to be a situation where this escalates, it'll be along the Suwalki corridor. It'll be along Western Ukraine, where NATO inevitably enters the western part of Ukraine. And we know that right now, all of the variables in play, including and not limited to the big NATO exercise going on there, the air alerts that have been put out, the restrictions on filming of military equipment in Poland, the amassing of force along the border with Belarus by Poland. These are all telltale signs that something is about to go down. So you would not put all these things into play, unless there was, or at least I should say it this way, that if you were going to do some sort of military campaign, this is what it would start off as, an exercise. Just like the Russian campaign started before the invasion of Ukraine, okay? So basically they're saying that Polish and American intelligence are preparing a large-scale provocation against the civilian population of Poland, for which they will blame Russia and Belarus. Now, they're also saying that this could potentially involve the chemical weapons, possibly nuclear weapons, because Kiev had allegedly asked the youth to supply it with hundreds of thousands of antidotes, gas masks, and other personal protective equipment in 2024. This is in addition to 600,000 ampoules of, I always hated that word, ampoules. Anyways, ampoules of organophosphorus antidotes and 750,000 bottles of drugs for the detoxification of mustard gas, and lewisite, as well as for hydrocyanic acid derivatives that were supplied by NATO countries in 2023. Now, there has been some questionable footage that the Russians claim show Ukrainians dropping gas, but you can't really tell if it's Ukrainians dropping it or if it's Russians dropping these what appear to be smoke grenades. Perhaps they're emitting some kind of chemical, and the guy is struggling to breathe. Okay, so there have been accusations that this has already been used. Of course, if you use something like this, if you can get something set up to where it looks like Russia or Belarus even utilize chemical weapons against the Polish population, well, I mean, that's all the green light you need to intervene in some way, shape, or form. It will likely come in the form, however, of them entering into the western part of Ukraine. What they need to do is get into western Ukraine. Now, of course, this is going to be very challenging because of what's going on in the border there right now, but I almost wonder, is that cover? You know, and it just occurred to me now, is that whole thing, because it's very convenient to have that going on in the border, because you know the Russians are trying to, you know, watch this situation and surveil it to the best of their capability. Could it be that this whole issue between Ukrainian grain and Polish farmers is somewhat manufactured to provide cover for something else that's about to go down? Now, I think how they're going to bait the Russians into a fight, if you're of that belief that it's us who are going to attempt to bait the Russians in, is they're going to have to launch these F-16s from somewhere. Some people are saying that they've already been active. Some people are saying that they've been active since the beginning of the year. And they're going to have to launch these from presumably surrounding countries, Romania, Poland. Eventually, if these start taking their toll, and they get the Taurus missiles from Germany, and they start taking their toll, they're going to have to, and they get the longer range ATACMS and whatever from the Americans, they're going to have to do something. They're going to have to send a message. If they're launching these F-16s from Poland, and the supposed F-16s that Poland is scrambling on a daily basis now to counter the Russian threat, if those F-16s are in fact the F-16s that are running sorties, targeting, taking out all these Russian warplanes that have been shot down. That's another thing I forgot to mention. In the last 4 days, there's been 5 or 6 Russian warplanes shot down. If that's the case, then eventually the Russians are going to shoot a missile into Poland to try to take out one of these F-16s. And then the Poles are just going to say, hey, we were just policing our airspace, and you shot at us. Now we got to declare war on Belarus. This is why Lukashenko knows something is coming. He's trying to soften people to the idea. Now, the problem when you accuse somebody of doing a false flag, the idea is to defuse the situation and hope they don't do it. This was the case with Sergei Shoigu in late 2022, where he called up all the ministries of defense or the defense ministers of all the NATO countries and said, hey, we got some intelligence that suggests that Ukraine is about to detonate a dirty bomb and try to blame it on us in order to bring NATO into the conflict. Lo and behold, nothing happened. And perhaps nothing happened because, and I just say perhaps, because this is the Russian narrative now. I don't know what to believe, to be brutally honest. Perhaps they were able to prevent, or the Ukrainians thought, well, it's just not worth the squeeze because now the cat's out of the bag, right? You know, he just made this big public display about it. And oftentimes I think that'll work. However, it can also work the other way. And if the brainwashing and the propaganda is good enough, all they're going to say is you were just saying that to try to front run the whole thing so that when it happened, you would be able to absolve yourself of culpability. When you could just have, set that whole thing up to do that. So what is done in an attempt to potentially try to absolve oneself of responsibility will then be used against you, right? He who smelled it dealt it sort of thing. So I do foresee that this is going to be the next frontier. I mean, inevitably, as the Russians push on multiple fronts along the entire line, from Robotyno to Zaporozhye to Avdiivka to probably going to start making some maneuvers around Kharkov and even south in Kherson, as they're slowly, tightening the noose. This is when you're going to see NATO or the West try to make a move because they're running out of time. But maybe this is what they want. Maybe they want some big event that is going to say, look, now we have to do something. And all of you naysayers who didn't provide support before, look at what you did. This is your fault. So they're going to play the blame game, but they need a big event. Okay, now, again, I'm just throwing ideas out there. We're spitballing. That's why you come to this channel. You come to this channel because my predictions on a long enough timeline tend to be true. Case in point, I recently said on multiple occasions in the last couple months that how they're going to resolve the immigrant issue is they're going to kill two birds with one stone. They're going to say, look, we're going to give you your citizenship if you go and you fight this war for us, because right now we're having this enlistment crisis. Nobody wants to join the military, so we need to fill the ranks somehow. I've been saying this for months. I've been joking, making movie references to things like Starship Troopers, you know, where the whole motto is service guarantees citizenship. And even in Ukraine right now, what are you seeing? Service guarantees citizenship. If you don't commit to the mobilization and you don't succumb to conscription, you can't use your debit card, you can't drive a car, you can't get married, you can't partake in society, okay? So this is going to be how they do it. If you don't do your service, if you don't do your time, you're going to get cut off. No universal basic income for you, and no more virtual reality, you know, AI, Sora credits for you this month. That's how they're going to do it. You want to get pregnant, you want a pregnancy license, well, you're going to have to make sure that you've done your time in the military. This is how they're going to address, but first they need those austere conditions, and they need some big flashbulb event. But first they're going to go for the immigrants. And I've been saying this time and time again. Now everybody's coming out of the woodwork saying, oh yeah, I knew this was going to happen. No, you didn't. I mean, people are calling, you know, I have a friend of mine who made a good point about the Romans and how they used to do this, and this is what precipitated collapse, was bringing all the barbarian hordes into the military, and he's right about that. But people forget, you know, that people forget like the whole Gangs of New York scene where the Irish were coming in and they were immediately conscripted to go and fight for the North. But, you know, hindsight is 2020, I guess, but I never heard anybody else talking about this particular resolution except this channel right here. Now, this is what they're proposing, and this is bipartisan. So we have a Democrat member of the House of Representatives, and John James, who's a Michigan Republican, and Pat Ryan's a Democrat, aiming to provide an expedited path to citizenship for immigrants willing to serve in the armed forces. You know what? I truly think these guys are watching my videos. I mean, I'm not trying to be arrogant here, okay? I'm not trying to, because, you know, pride comes before the fall. I get that. But, you know, with the Russian space nukes thing, and now this, we're going to do a test right now, okay? Before I go any further in this, I'm just going to throw an idea out, and we're going to see if the illuminated ones capitalize on this, because I'm sure that some of these guys are watching my videos. Because I've literally just said this verbatim in multiple videos over the last few weeks. Here's an idea, shadowy overlords. If you want to boost your enrollment numbers, right now there is everybody's interested in prepping, right? Because they're worried about the end of the world. If you market it as get the survival skills you need to fight the zombie apocalypse or something like that, if you put that kind of spin on it, you got to incorporate it into that pop cultural element that is absolutely obsessed with apocalypticism right now. You have to merge those two things. If you do that, okay, I guarantee you're going to boost your enrollment numbers. You know, you sweeten the deal a little bit. Say, if you don't come back in a body bag, we'll give you, you know, a few years of university or something, which, of course, you know, by that point in time, you know, are you even going to have any job to go to after university, because we'll have mastered AI? But try that. And if you guys see this roll out in the next couple months, we will know, okay, if we see this advertisement that promotes the military as a means of acquiring survival and preparedness skills to get ready for the end of days, remember where you heard it first. All right, so Representatives Ryan and James, both military veterans, proposed the bill to address immigration and military recruitment challenges. A practical solution I mean, the stuff writes itself. If you got immigrants, as long as they have an IQ, what is it, above 80, and they can speak decent English, it's a great pathway to citizenship. Hey, we're going to give you 3 hots and a cot. You can have an option, okay? You can, forever exist in this limbo and be running from the authorities, or you get 3 hots and a cot. There's a good chance that we might not go to nuclear Armageddon, but if we do, then you're fucked. But there's a good chance we won't, because we're casualty averse here in the West, and we like just doing things remotely. We like doing our killing remotely. So there's a good chance you won't die. You give us 3 years of your life, maybe even a year, and we'll get the wheels turning. Maybe even just 6 months, right? And you give us the promise of 3 years where you're like in some militia type situation where we can call you up if need be, because we know a big war is coming in 3 years, or they'll make sure they stretch it out to time it to whatever war they're planning next. And that's how they're going to get people. And you got hundreds of thousands. Now, this is going to be met with resistance by the left. It's going to be met with resistance on humanitarian grounds. They're going to say this is discrimination and blah, blah, blah. And on the right, they're going to say, oh, this is going to be foreign countries infiltrating the ranks of our military. Do we want these Chinese illegal immigrants, in the ranks of the military, potentially sabotaging the operations and collecting intelligence? That's going to be the debate. But I guarantee you that they're going to do this. They'll probably try to do it under the radar. They do have a 40,000 recruit shortfall. A 40,000 recruit shortfall while they're starting wars on multiple fronts. And don't say that the Americans aren't starting to try. Look, Americans, Canadians, I always have to say this every video because sometimes it's the first time a person has watched my channel. Just because I'm the Canadian prepper, I don't hate on Americans. When I say Americans, I mean Canadians and Americans. We're bundled, we're joined at the hip. Same culture. Our quarters fit in your pop machines, or at least they used to. I don't even think we use quarters in machines anymore because it's too damn expensive. But you get my point. Same culture, everything. Down the middle, we are the same, okay? And that is also in terms of our military partnership. If you do something, we do the same. Occasionally, we'll vote in a different way in the UN just to create the illusion that we're different, but we're really not. So when I say American, I mean Canadian, all right? For all you sensitive snowflakes out there. So anyways, 40,000 recruit shortfall. While we start wars on multiple fronts, the insanity of that, what this means, this increases the likelihood. Some people will say, well, this decreases the likelihood that they're going to go to war. I say it's equally likely that it increases the likelihood that they're going to utilize non-conventional methods, or that they're going to be forced to. As I've always said on the animation that took us 2 days and multiple people working on to make, the short animation, which I thought was very well done. Apparently the algorithm doesn't think so, like most of our best content. Sorry, it sounds kind of resentful. Maybe it is a little bit, but it is what it is. So anyways, the gist of the video was that when the conventional munitions run out, what else do you have at your disposal but nuclear weapons? So if Russia runs out of artillery before we do, who is more likely to have to utilize a nuclear option? Russia, especially if they're losing. So the goal is to not run out of conventional munitions. If you're a person who lacks scruples and you're not too concerned about the value of human life, maybe look into investing in the military stocks, especially the ones who make those military shells. Because I can guarantee you, for the foreseeable future, that is going to be a lucrative investment. Now, I was going to talk a little bit about what they're going to do to try to control the narrative throughout the next year in particular. And they're already setting it up, okay? Putin is gonna, and Xi, and Lukashenko, and Kim Jong-un, and the Iranian guy, they're all going to try to mess with our elections. Therefore, we gotta crack down, right? We gotta make sure that they're not able to disrupt, the systems that uphold our democratic values and blah, blah bullshit. So they're going to basically set up a framework for censorship. I'm gonna talk more about that tomorrow because this video is already running on too damn long, 30 minutes, Jesus. Yeah. So anyways, that's how World War III is going to start. Prepare for it. IAEA chief says Iran is bulking up stockpile of nearly weapon-grade uranium. Not surprisingly, this is from the Times of Israel, which is notoriously anti-Iranian. If you believe that the Iranians are going to get a nuclear weapon and immediately use it against Israel, then that's one of the most asinine propaganda pieces you succumb to, unfortunately, because it makes absolutely no sense. What this is likely going to do, it's going to lead to a nuclear escalation at some point down the line, but the idea that Iran is just going to use it on religious grounds, that they've built up this great civilization that's been through thousands of years, just to completely lose it all due to being blown off the map with the American and Israeli nuclear weapons is just stupid, okay? It's stupid. It's bullshit propaganda that has no basis in reality whatsoever. What's going to happen is that the Iranians have their nuclear centrifuges and all that stuff. It's so deep in the ground that there's no way the Americans and Israelis can attack it. The only way they can get to it is by somebody who's compromised, and maybe through another cyber attack, possibly by employing some kind of new subterranean technology. But it's very likely that the Iranians are going to get nuclear weapons. In fact, Rafael Grossi, the IAEA chief, says that they already have the nuclear material needed to make 3 nukes. So that they have a strategic military partnership with Russia and China and North Korea, I mean, come on. Of course they're going to get nuclear weapons. It's just a matter of time. We can only hope, and this might seem naive to people, and trust me, I'm not naive. This is the guy who says that multipolarity is just another word for Cold War. Permanent, perpetual Cold War. That's what multipolarity is. Because we are not a species that is meant to coexist. We always have to, you know, there was this video game I used to play, what was it called? Like, you start off as a cell, I think it was called Spore. You start off as a cell and you eventually, you know, evolve up the food chain, and eventually, you know, tribes fight for, you know, control over a nation, and then nations fight, and the goal is to become this globalized species or whatever, which is ultimately, look, on a long enough timeline, it's going to happen. Arguably, it already kind of sort of did with the Pax Americana and the US dollar, but of course that failed. So we're going to have multipolarity, and it's going to be a permanent state of Cold War. And where was I going with this? I completely lost my train of thought. Fill in the blanks down below, but the shit's going to hit the fan, so you better prepare for it. Fortunately, like I said, you know, the things that we're going to value when the shit hits the fan, they're cheap right now. Big screen TVs, 8K, not cheap. Getting cheaper. Okay, Germany is going to send Taurus missiles. They're going to vote on that this week. They're calling them long-range weapon systems to try to circumvent the public opinion about the issue. Missiles have a range of 500 kilometers. I think I talked briefly about the whole F-16 from Poland thing. So yeah, that's going to factor into that. It's probably because the Scalp missiles and the Storm Shadow missiles are starting to become depleted, and the Ukrainians, who are now on the back foot, are in need of more supplies. And again, they're running out of the small stuff, so they're starting to give them the big stuff. But Europe is going on a full-blown war footing. I mean, nothing is clear. I mean, they're pushing ahead with these sanctions. The death of what's-his-face in the Russian prison. I mean, everything is just escalating day after day after day, but we don't see it. We're so desensitized to it that it just seems like just another day. Oh, yeah, I mean, think about if the Houthis had sunk a ship, shot down a U.S. drone, captured a submersible, shot at 2 other ships. That would be front-page news just a few months ago. Now, not even remotely close. That tells you how far we've fallen. Mr. Tony Stark, Elon Musk, was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Well, what people don't realize about Mr. Musk is that all of his companies, shell companies perhaps, are just there for the purpose of emboldening the military-industrial complex. SpaceX, led by Elon Musk, is deepening its ties with U.S. government departments, particularly intelligence and defense agencies, marking a shift towards privatization in traditionally government-dominated sectors. Now, I can't stand the X-Men movies like I can't stand wrestling. I simply cannot stand watching grown-ass men watching these child fantasy movies. I fucking hate these movies, okay? I'm going on a rant tonight. But because I just believe they dumb us down and they indoctrinate us with so much bullshit. But I do recall the scene in one of those movies with Tony Stark where he's showing how the private, he's being examined, cross-examined or something like that. And he's trying to show the government that, hey, the private sector is superior. How is that not, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. How is that not the same as this? How did they not just basically prime us all to accept that idea that, yes, we need to rely on SpaceX to launch all of these military satellites on the same day that we accuse Russia of space nukes, no less. Starlink, which is being used by the military. Twitter, also known as X, which will totally be subverted by the military when the time comes, mark my words, especially as it's being masqueraded as this bastion of free speech. You know they're going to ultimately, when the time comes, use that against people. That's why I say, remember the 100 Flowers campaign in Maoist China, where they encouraged people to speak out. They made them think that it was a free platform. And the only way you do that is if you have people to help you sell that idea. Now, I'm not saying everybody's knowingly in on it. I'm just saying when the time comes, turnkey totalitarianism will be there. Pretty much all of the things. Neuralink, Tesla, I mean, the self-driving capability. Mark my words, the whole point of self-driving, and this is here, as another idea for you. Let me ghostwrite for you guys. Tesla self-driving is all about military robotics, because all of that sensory data and the algorithm that is being honed and refined day after day, that visual system, will be utilized in a military capacity. That's what it's all working towards. The ability to have a vehicle which can drive better than any human, see more than any human, and be able to, carry out a mission in an immaculate way with no, errors, no margin for human error. That is what the ultimate goal is. So all of Elon Musk's companies are ultimately going to, whether he knows it or not, even the Boring Company, which is probably digging tunnels for the American government, they're all going to be used for militaristic purposes. I have no doubt about that. And so, yeah, he's being nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. Venezuela is going to join BRICS, and the Russians are going to help Venezuelans get nuclear technology. Not nuclear weapons, at least not at the start, but that's going to be the argument that the Americans use to go in there when the oil runs out everywhere else. Because, of course, Venezuela has some of the largest supplies of oil. So the big prize is Venezuela. It always has been. They have so much oil in that country. And, while people might say that our refineries are not tuned to process that type of oil, they got enough of it that there's more than enough justification to rebuild or retool or do whatever we have to do and try to subvert the government. I'm not condoning this. I'm just saying this is what the CIA is going to do. It's what they've been trying to do. They want all that oil that's there, and it's close. You don't have to go overseas. You don't have to mess with the Middle East. You can just basically abandon the Middle East, which is possibly what they're going to do at some point, but they still have this Israeli situation there, and maybe this is the end game. Maybe this is where, Israel as the policeman of the Middle East, maybe this is where they just pull the whole operation. And they say, okay, this ain't working, and, maybe they flex a Samson option a little bit, but never do it, or maybe they do. But yeah, they're going to go for Venezuela because Venezuela is joining BRICS. They're building strategic partnerships with Russia, and then of course you have Argentina, and then the whole South American axis and axes are going to become firmly delineated soon. Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, is reminding us that the only way to get rid of the Houthi problem, the Houthis sinking a British ship, is a reminder that the only way to stop it is to confront the source, i.e. Iran. And Washington is preparing Northern Europe for war. So they now have access, as I've talked about before, to all the bases in Norway and Sweden and all those places, and they're getting ready to stoke the flames of Russophobia to start a war on that front as well. The Russians deny the desire to put nukes in space. Now you're going to have those Russophiles who take Russia at their word for everything. I think that's very naive. However, you know, this is clearly cover for something that the U.S. is up to also. So I think both sides are playing the other, okay? And now the U.S. officials are saying that they think that Russians are going to actually put these nukes in space by the end of 2024. What's at the end of 2024? Election season. Both sides, it's all about keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. The same thing with Saudi Arabia and Iran. I had a friend ask me the other day, what is the situation with Saudi Arabia and Iran? Why is Iran, who are arch enemies with the Saudis, seemingly trying to form a military partnership? And you have their defense ministers meeting. Meanwhile, the Saudi warehouses are filled to the rim with all kinds of American military equipment. They've been getting the most American military equipment, even more so than Israel, for many, many years. So you're telling me that the Saudis are not going to be complicit with whatever the Americans have planned? This is all a front. Okay, countries do this in the run-up to conflict, and I think both the Iranians and the Saudis know that this is just a game. The Iranians are going to play dumb and pretend to go along because you keep your friends close and your enemies closer, regardless of whatever deals were brokered with the Chinese and the Russians. Maybe they all know that this whole Israeli experiment is going to finish soon, and the focus is going to be shifted to Venezuela, and the Americans are going to say, sorry, Israel, the money ran out, you're on your own. Use the Samson option if you want, I guess. But I think what the Iranians and the Saudis are doing is it's just a matter of playing the game, you know. But realistically, they both know that war is going to come, and it's just a matter of, you know, the Iranians are going to play dumb and pretend that they're naive, that, you know, the Saudis and the Americans aren't just trying to, you know, buy some time and get closer to them, and the Saudis are going to play the same game. But ultimately, you can't deny the reality that is on the ground. The Egyptians are being hurt by this embargo that the Houthis are waging in the Red Sea, and they're getting their military more activated because the Suez Canal is collapsing in terms of its utility. The Egyptian economy is in the absolute shitter. You got all these climate issues affecting food production throughout the entire region and the entire world for that matter. And you know that it's only a matter of time before these militaries have to mobilize in some capacity. So everybody's going to play the Mr. Nicey Nice game until, you know, it's time to stab someone in the back, because that's the reality. It's a game theory situation, and it is what it is. And as we're in a period of contraction, unless we have some windfall of energy and the party starts up again and the money printer continues to go burr, this party is about to end. But as I stated at the beginning of this video, you still have time to capitalize. You know what? We're going to go out to some of the local shops, not the local shops because they've all been closed due to that thing that went around for the last 4 years, but the big box stores. The only thing that remains, except CanadianPreparedness.com, where you should shop if you want to support this channel. I could come on here every day and put some bullshit ad in front of your face. I may or may not believe in it at times, but I just don't do that. I march to the beat of my own drum. However, because I realize that not a lot of people have the money to afford the stuff that we sell, I'm going to go out to Walmart. We're going to go out to different places like Costco and all the only big box stores that remain. I mean, you could probably fit them all in one hand, to be honest. And we're just going to go shopping. We're going to look for some, lesser known, more non-conventional forms of preparedness items that you can get from those places that people might not think about. I'm dreading if somebody recommends me to go to IKEA, because if there was ever a place that was completely worthless in a shit hit the fan situation, it's IKEA. I think I went there once, and I got dragged there by the wife, and I was like, all right, maybe I can find some stuff to, think outside the box, prepping items. I think I walked out with some candles. That was it. So please don't make me do IKEA again. Please don't make me do it. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.